All right, so we're back working on the Raptor, and we are installing a air intake or a cold air intake or a stage 2 intake, whatever you want to call it. It is an AFE Power Momentum GT dry air intake. I bought this specifically because right now I had a oiled drop-in, and I wanted to do something dry because I've had issues with oiled ones in the past. So I wanted to go dry, and I also wanted to switch to a conical air filter, hoping to get a little better gas mileage on a road trip that I was about to do. So I went with this. I do believe that they stopped making the Momentum. I think they have a different version now that they're still selling, but I did not see this on their website unless it was part of a special kit. Yeah. So I took everything out of the box. Everything was really well packaged, and everything was quality. I've had AFE products before, and they've always been fantastic. Everything that you need to install this very quickly and very easily is inside of the box. So it comes with fantastic instructions. I was really impressed with the instructions, and it comes with all of the extra little bits that you need to get it to work with your vehicle. Alright, so the first step is to disconnect the temperature sensor that's on the back side of that Y pipe. Whenever I originally did this, there's this factory tape that comes wrapped around that tapes the wiring to the sensor. So you need to cut the tape, don't cut the sensor or the wire, cut the tape in order to actually pull the wiring off of that sensor. And then you also need to unclip the vacuum lines, which are connected to the back side of the airbox. So you can knock that out before you start pulling off the Y pipe, just as make sure you get it all done first, right? So you have to disconnect the Y pipe. You do not need to disconnect, there are 3 clamps on it. You don't need to disconnect the clamp that goes to the airbox because you can pull the whole airbox out with it, or at least the top of the airbox. But you do need to undo the ones that go to the turbos. So just disconnect those pipes and pull them right out. The one on the bottom is really difficult to get to, and depending on how the factory had installed yours, mine originally was pointed in a really weird direction, and it took me forever to get it off, but I repositioned it whenever I reinstalled it, so it was a little easier this time. There are 3 points where the rest of your airbox is held in. The actual airbox itself is held in with, I believe it's a 13mm bolt on the side that bolts into the side. And then the snorkel portion has 2 rivet clips, 2 plastic rivet clips. And those are the 2-part rivet clips, so you need to undo the top part, pull that out, and then you can pull out the bottom portion, which actually holds it in. The kit comes with replacement ones, which are just 1 piece, which I guess it's more convenient, and they're also pretty stiff, so they hold it in really well. Alright, so the next step is to install an extended valve cover vent fitting into the driver's side turbo intake pipe. This is supposed to prevent, the new excess air from pressurizing the valve cover and causing a check engine light. there should be a check valve in there, but maybe the additional air prevents proper operation of that, and this new fitting is supposed to limit that. In the instructions, it has a simple push clip to just pop right out, but mine had a full clip on both sides, and I had to use, you can use a flathead screwdriver. I used a trim puller to just pop it out, and here I am installing the new fitting. The instructions show a fancy metal one, but mine was just plastic, and you insert it with the slash facing toward the turbo, so that that new air just goes around it instead of going up inside of it. So you need to pull this old grommet off of the old airbox and just reinstall it on the new airbox. It pops right in, and this is where that bolt is going to go in that holds the airbox into the vehicle. So this is a weird one for me. The vacuum lines that clipped in on the back of the old airbox are supposed to clip into this one also, but there's no actual holes. There's just little spots that you're supposed to drill holes into. Yeah, so you just drill those holes out, which run directly into the intake. It's a little weird, but I mean, it's not like it's going to cause any problems with operation, so I went ahead and did it. So while it is really cool that this is all one piece, it's also really difficult to get a ratchet in there and to tighten down. There's not a lot of space to ratchet back and forth. I recommend using like a 1/4" drive ratchet in order to tighten it down easier, because the 3/8 are usually a little too long to fit in there and have a lot of room. After I installed those new push rivets, I realized that I forgot a step. I was supposed to install this little rubber gasket while I was outside of the vehicle, but I installed it while I was on the vehicle, and it wasn't a big deal. I did have to readjust it because it wasn't centered properly. You could probably measure it, mark a center point, and then mark the center point on the intake, and then install it to make sure that it was fit properly. But here I am clipping on the those vacuum lines onto the intake. On one of the sides it didn't fit properly, so I had to cut the tape and then reposition it and then tape it back up again to make sure that it held properly. Not a big deal though. Before I started the truck up, I actually panicked, thinking like, oh no, what if I didn't pull the plastic off of the this air filter? But I did, so that's good. It doesn't actually, it's not mechanically held into that case. It's just held in there by a little bit of pressure from the outside of the air filter, and then the pressure pushing in on the box from the Y pipe. So that's interesting, I guess. Now the sensor on the old intake clipped in. This one just has a gasket that you install. So you push the gasket in there, and then you pull off the sensor from the old intake, and you install it here. This grommet was really hard to get in. I ended up using like a trim tool, and you could probably use like soapy water or something like that, but it was pretty cold whenever I installed this, and I didn't want anything wet on my hands. Yeah, so then I pulled off the old sensor. Make sure you pay attention to the orientation of the sensor. I honestly don't know if it matters, but after I pulled it out, I was like, oh no, which way does it go? Is it gonna measure the temperature properly? It's not a MAF, it should be a temperature sensor, so either way, it shouldn't really matter which direction it goes, but just in case. The little silicone hoses that attach to this are 2 different sizes, so you can't mess them up. Make sure that you put both of the hose clamps on there before you install it. I forgot, and then I ended up having to take apart one of the hose clamps, wrap it around, and then reinstall it, which that's not a big deal, but it would be a lot more convenient if you just kept it all together, slid the new hose clamp on beforehand, and then you wouldn't have to worry about it. Again, always make sure that you pay attention to the orientation here, which way you want it to go, before you install it. That way it makes completion of the installation easier, and then it makes uninstalling it in the future a lot easier also. So I finally got that lower hose clamp installed, and obviously the next step is to reconnect the sensor. I completely forgot to do that until after I started the vehicle, and I had to reconnect it later. But make sure that you reconnect that sensor. Just follow the instructions step by step. They're fantastic instructions, and they're very beneficial. Alright, and after you're done, you snap a picture for the YouTube. So again, the reason that I purchased this was to hopefully improve some, the fuel efficiency during a road trip that I was going to take, and to switch to a dry filter. I will say that, personally for me, I did not see any difference whatsoever. There wasn't any additional fuel efficiency, there wasn't any additional intake noise, I couldn't notice any change in performance at the throttle. Now this could be because I already have a front mount intercooler and a stage 2 tune from Cobb. That tune is a 91 tune, so I do plan on switching to a 93 map since I'm now in a state that has 93. And then possibly do a goose tune in the future after some exhaust modification. I have had one issue with the intake, and that was about halfway through the road trip. I was in Nebraska near Omaha, and there was some weird traffic, so I kept having to go on and off the throttle, and I popped the check engine light, and when I checked it, it came up with a PCV valve disconnected or something like that, a hose disconnected, and all I did was basically restart the truck. and it was perfectly fine after that. So that's the only issue that I've had. I would not recommend purchasing this specific intake or any of the other AFE intakes that are like it, just because they're insanely expensive. I think the list for this was like $800, but I got it, got something like 70% off. That's the only reason I purchased it, is I saw the opportunity to get a dry intake, and I jumped on it. So hopefully this helps you make a decision whether or not you want to purchase one of these, and give you an idea of how the install is. But yeah, hopefully I get out another video next week. I'm trying to do a once a week video, but I completely forgot about editing until this morning, which is why it's coming out late. But hopefully I see you again next week. Thank you for watching.